good morning. It is a Thursday morning here in Lee County, and we have a one-poem segment today. Pete, would you please introduce our poem that we're going to talk about today?
Thank you, Jack. The poem that we're going to discuss today is titled Ephemera by William Butler Yeats. And this is an early Yeats poem, first published in 1884, and then 5 years later in Yeats's book of poems, The Wanderings of, how do you say that, Jack?
Oisin.
Oisin?
Yeah, Oisin.
Yeah. So we have it right here, and what we like this poem, and we're very eager to tell more about it. I'll mention this at the beginning. I hadn't thought of it when we first started preparing for this talk, but Ephemera by William Butler Yeats is very similar to, but significantly different from, the poem Neutral Tones by Thomas Hardy, which is probably a much better known poem than this one here. But both of them involve just two people together, outdoors, somewhat of a nature setting. And what we have in the Yeats poem is a story not burdened by the iconography of time and place. We simply know that it's autumn, and we know where it is, and a little more about that in a moment. There's a structure of dialogue to the play, the poem. He said, she said. He begins, and he also ends. And when she comes in, let me backtrack for a moment. Your eyes that once were never weary of mine are bowed in sorrow under pendulous lids, because our love is waning. Now, I don't know if people can see that, but I'm looking particularly at the second line, at that diction, which certainly could be common to the late Victorian period out of which Yeats is writing, yet, bowed in sorrow under pendulous lids may seem flowery, but it's still accurate to what's being observed. Then she comes in and talks. She's speaking, and she introduces in her dialogue the place where they are, the lone border of the lake, and that's about all we get. It doesn't get any more specific.
Okay.
And it's two people and a rabbit, and the rabbit happens to be old and lame, and he limps down a path. He comes into the poem a little later. Jack, you were going to say something?
Well, why don't you give us a full reading so that our readers
okay.
have a point of reference?
Sure. Your eyes that once were never weary of mine are bowed in sorrow under pendulous lids, because our love is waning. And then she, although our love is waning, let us stand by the lone border of the lake once more, together in that hour of gentleness, when the poor, tired child, passion, falls asleep. How far away the stars seem, and how far is our first kiss, and how old my heart. Pensive they paced along the faded leaves, while slowly he whose hand held hers replied, "Passion has often worn our wandering hearts." The woods were round them, and the yellow leaves fell like faint meteors in the gloom. And once a rabbit old and lame limped down the path. Autumn was over him, and now they stood on the lone border of the lake once more. Turning, he saw that she had thrust dead leaves, gathered in silence, dewy as her eyes, in bosom and hair. "Ah, do not mourn," he said, "that we are tired, for other loves await us. Hate on and love through unrepining hours. Before us lies eternity. Our souls are love, and a continual farewell." I don't think that there's a word or a syllable wasted in this poem. I don't think there's a word or a syllable somehow not put to good use. I think every syllable plays an integral part of the whole, and therefore, even though the poem's diction is late Victorian and somewhat flowery, I think that there's a great economy of language here. And this being an early poem of Yeats, I'd like to address something else. In some contexts there, or circles, whatever, there's the idea, that the poet or the fiction writer must get better as he or she matures, and I first encountered Yeats in a college classroom. So, we're studying the early poems, the middle poems, the late poems, and I never remember my teacher saying exactly, Yeats was just getting better and better. I myself feel that this is as good. I'm sorry, I tell me I'm wrong, tell me I'm right, whatever. And I'm not trying to start an argument, but this to me is as good as his famous poem, Lydia and the Swan. Or the Lake Isle of Innisfree. I hadn't thought about saying that before coming to our talk here, but why not? And I will go on to tell why before we're done, I hope. But you got the dialogue structure. We used to be great together, but now we're not. We're tired of each other, the paraphrase. And then she says, the lone border of the lake once more. Okay, they've been there before, and she personifies passion as a sleeping child, and in his dialogue, he picks up on that. While pensive here's the narrator, pensive they paced along the faded leaves, while slowly he whose hand held hers replied, "Passion has often worn our wandering hearts." And Jack and I discussed the word "worn" the other day in preparation for this talk, and I feel it's a pun. Did you feel that way too, Jack? That it's got a double meaning here?
Yes, it does have a double meaning. It can be looked at two different ways. One is in the sense that their love is wearing out, and the other sense is that the havenness of their love or their relationship, they're wearing that. As if it's a jacket or a heavy coat or something of that nature.
Like wearing your heart on your sleeve.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's sort of this double entendre, if you will, of meaning there, and both are applicable, I think. I think you don't have to dig too deep to get the idea of what he's trying to communicate about this love that's just stifled and it's not going anyplace anymore. The relationship is fading away, like the autumn leaves, for example.
And you notice too, after worn and after the white space, there is the line with the yellow leaves in it. It's the only bit of color in this poem, you know, that to my mind evokes kind of an overcast day, and I don't see any sunlight suggested in the poem. Those leaves fell in the gloom, and then you got a rabbit old and lame limped down the path. Of course, if he would have said an old lame rabbit limped down the path, it wouldn't be as good. You've got that alliterative lame and limp giving the line an energy boost in the middle. But let's go to this image of the leaves. The narrator doesn't say, no, the narrator does say, turning, he saw that she had thrust dead leaves in bosom and hair. Now the modifier there between the leaves and the hair is, people probably can't see this, I'll put it right up there, gathered in silence, and then dewy as her eyes. Gee whiz, that's kind of flowery language, dewy as her eyes, but you know, maybe they're damp.
Well,
you know?
no, again, it plays to the motive that there's some heartbreak happening here, and that she's crying, and that, no, they're both emotional.
Oh, there you go, yeah.
But the thing is that remembering the Victorian era, there's a lot of repression in terms of emotional, what we would call today emotional intelligence. The ability to express our emotions openly and freely, and and get what each other is trying to say through how we feel. The thing is that the Victorian era uses this language, and specifically with poetry, but you can find it in the prose also, and that's why it's art in many respects. Is that it may not be common everyday parlance, it may not be the common tongue of the era so much, but people, especially in more refined society, I'm thinking like Jane Austen, for example, used language and elevated it, and they used words that we don't use today. And in many cases, the language they used back in the late 19th century was more complex and more rich and more full, in the sense that they could use one word and express a meaning that we would have to use 12 words today to express the same meaning.
Can you give an example of that?
Well, let's go with something like, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but superbia or superbia.
Oh, okay.
Okay. That simply means pride or hubris. All right. But to say the same thing, like his superbia inflated his life.
You're not going to hear anybody saying that
today.
Today.
What we're going to hear today is that he was full of pride. He was full of arrogant pride.
Yeah, good,
Okay.
good example.
Because, again, you're using 4 or 5 words to describe the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay? And, another word, august, all right, which means regal and, noble. Well, today we know that in the English language, we would probably use modifiers to indicate a person who had a big reputation. Whereas, his august presence filled the room. We'll say, the dude walked in the room and everyone's eyes turned to him and looked at him. And when you think about what people say today, that guy walked into the room, and he looked like $1 million.
It's not going to be his august presence.
Right.
And with the dewy eyes, yeah, she's been crying. And I really had not given that much thought, but I did give some thought to the lack of a possessive adjective coming before bosom and hair.
Right.
He saw, the narrator could have simply said, turning, she thrust dead leaves gathered in silence. Dead leaves gathered in silence. But the narrator didn't say that. Turning, he saw, and then you got that present perfect verb, had thrust dead leaves gathered in silence, dewy as her eyes, in bosom and hair.
Now, think about the irony of this, all right? They're walking together. They're holding hands, right? Where was his eyes beforehand? That when he turns to, you got leaves in your bra and your hair is covered in leaves. What happened? Again, it evokes the image without saying it. You're giving emotion to the lady here that she thrust these leaves into her bosom. Well, how did that happen? Again, it evokes this image of time passing by. We know that the leaves are falling. We know that it's autumn. We know it's a season of things winding up. So the image of the leaves being where they are there's something magical about it.
And to me, that image accents her womanliness.
Yes. Her
too.
femininity. Her femininity.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a little, woman, this was easier off of my tongue than femininity, but that wasn't so hard. But yeah, what's that all about? Now, see, if I wanted to play the devil's advocate, and Yeats were here with us, I'd say, well, gee, they're walking side by side, and all of a sudden she stoops and picks up some leaves and puts them on her chest and her hair.
Well, I think what really he's trying to get at is this idea of time.
Yeah.
Passing, and it's really a short space of time, but yet there is something eternal about it. There's enough time that passes that you can be covered up in leaves.
And consider what the poem would be without those leaves, without her thrusting those dead leaves.
But the thing is that, again, it gives this sense, when I'm thinking that particular line gives me an idea of Tolkien's character Galadriel in The Lord of the Rings. She is this old wise elf who appears young. She is ageless, in other words. She looks a certain age. She's not old. She's not a hag. She's beautiful, but she is old, and you can feel the weight of that age in her presence. And we have these two people walking through the woods. Again, the idea of the woods themselves, it's magical. It's enchanting, okay? The rabbit himself, as he's going through, he's old, he's limp, he's lame, but he's still going. He's a magical creature, okay? There's a magic here, even though the relationship is, fracturing, the love is dying. There's this element of mysticism that surrounds this setting. Okay, you're walking through the woods, you're headed to the shore of a lake. Well, let's think about the Arthurian legend, okay? Let's think about Avalon. Where's Avalon? It's in the middle of a lake somewhere. Okay, it's an island. Okay, who's the Lady of the Lake? The Lady of the Lake is who gives Excalibur to Arthur, right? So you see this whole, right here in this one little poem, you see this myth building happening. Because what he does here, he actually builds a myth about love. And about how love wanes and grows old if there's nothing behind it to keep it going.
In keeping in mind, too, that he was fairly, I don't know exactly how old he was. I mean, we could find out, but the point is he was pretty young when he wrote it. And, the strange thing, of course, juxtaposed.
Landed on the screen. We had a technical hiccup here. We lost about 15 minutes of our podcast. Pete, we were talking about how young Yeats was when he wrote this poem. Could you elaborate on that?
Only that, this would put him, well, in thinking it came out in 1884, maybe a little over 20 years old. Not much, but he gives the impression of somebody who is wise in years. I think there's some wisdom in this poem. I didn't say that earlier, but I think the poem certainly reflects that. I know I was struck by that image of the dead leaves, and we noticed that
well, we keep glitching here. Pete, if we were talking about the imagery of the poem, but let's go ahead and move on to you posed a couple of questions earlier about why is this poem relevant today, and why what's the point, so to speak. Would you care to talk about that for a little bit?
It's relevant because two people form a romantic relationship. They begin it, they are in the middle of it, and we are with them at the end of this romantic relationship. And you had said something earlier about people holding hands, which I thought was very much to the point.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned that you mentioned that people are it's two people who are holding hands and not two people who are sitting at a table, each with their face in a screen. And you were talking about how today's technology tends to be a barrier to actual communication.
Yeah, one conjures an image of people sitting side by side with partitions dividing them, and they're each looking at separate screens. That kind of isolation, and here we have two people in the flesh together, and that, as a matter of fact, that dead leaf image accents the flesh. Dewey has her eyes in bosom and hair, and it's relevant also, the poem, for as long as because people still today hold hands, the poem is relevant, because people are together, person to person, as these two are, and because it's relevant because it is language well used, and it's a good example of language well used that has a lot of subdued emotion to it, and risks but never lapses into sentimentality. I feel not at all, not for one single moment. He never lapses into sentimentality, and that could easily happen if this poem were in the hands of a lesser poet, and somebody were reading it, and they read the first few lines and they wanted to stop, or they did stop because it just seemed too sentimental, or they got to the middle and they stopped because of that sentimentality, or they thought that at the end.
Right.
I don't see that at all in this poem, sentimentality, but a lot of strong, subdued feeling.
True. Again, I think we mentioned that this poem could easily have fallen into histrionics, a maudlin mindset, in which I said something to the effect, there are poets who do go into the crying in your beer, but it's not just simply crying in your beer. You're flooding your keg with your tears. It's overblown, it's overdone. The emotion is overdone. Whereas in this poem, the emotion is very restrained, as indicative of the Victorian era and the late 19th century, due to cultural and societal norms of the period, especially with a stratified hierarchical society, such as the British Empire was. What else is evoked here, Pete? What else do you think?
I think that the dialogue part is managed very well. If you can see the radical indention at the beginning and at the end, Yeats lets us know exactly when she is speaking and when he is speaking and when this third person narrator is speaking. And as in the woods were around them and the yellow leaves fell like meteors in the gloom, and then we got that rabbit with that alliterative energy in the middle of the line. A rabbit old and lame limped. He limped down the path. Autumn was over him, and over the couple as well. But that's the narrator talking. And now they stood, and it's repeated for emphasis, on the lone border of the lake. And that tactile image of them holding hands in the middle of it's right in the middle of the poem, while slowly he whose hand held hers replied. There's that other tactile image where they're of separateness. She's thrusting the leaves in her bosom, and of course he doesn't say her bosom there. He doesn't have to.
Right.
And it would be a lesser poem if he had said that.
Right. So, for my part, I think I already mentioned it, that this poem is very mystical in many respects. You're in the woods, you're going to a lake, and the images that are evoked here is not of a bright sunny day like you said previously. No, it's a gray day. It's a sad day. The woods are dark. The leaves that fall are yellow. They're dead leaves. They're falling off the trees. And you already referenced that the only color that we have is the yellow. But when you reference woods, that evokes green, but a very dark green, an overshadowed green.
Yeah.
That's in contrast to the autumn leaves. And they get to the shore of the lake. Again, that lake is not a bright, happy place. It's a gray lake. And again, it's a very gothic kind of image to my mind. It may not be that way to everybody else, but to my mind, this poem I would classify as gothic in many respects, in the sense that it's dark and foreboding.
But like Edgar Allan Poe?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Or Daphne du Maurier.
Du Maurier.
Yeah, du Maurier, who wrote Rebecca. Okay, again, it's that sort of sense of foreboding and that's underlying the dialogue.
In thinking of time, we had mentioned this before, we had our technical glitch, but to pick up on it, the next to last line, before us lies eternity, our souls. Mm-hmm. See, that could be read, souls could be read as being in apposition with eternity.
Right.
But that's not what he says, because our souls is enjammed, the thought pattern continues on to the last line. Before us lies eternity, as if in the future. But he shifts to the present tense with the enjambment.
Yes.
Our souls are love, and the continual farewell. Pretty wise for somebody who is maybe in his very early 20s, or we could find out exactly how old Yeats was, but our souls aren't up among the stars, but within us, within you and me. And the continual farewell clearly suggests transience. Things happen and they never happen again, at least not in the same way. And because of that, things are all the more precious, let's say.
Yes.
But transience there. And to repeat myself for emphasis, I feel this is as good as many of the later Yeats poems,
right.
Many of the poems from his middle period too, and I feel fortunate to have stumbled upon it when I was curious to take a look at the early Yeats, and came upon this poem here, and we've enjoyed talking about it. And
Definitely.
And I'm sure we've said a whole bunch of illuminating things about it. I hope we have.
I believe we have. I would encourage our readers our listeners, the people who watch our podcast, I encourage you to check out not only this poem, but all the works of Yeats. Just be curious and read something that isn't written in modern English.
And again, I would encourage people to try to read this poem without the lines turning, he saw that she had thrust dead leaves gathered in silence, dewy as her eyes in bosom and hair, and see, I mean, it would be like really taking the air out of the poetic tires to me.
Yeah, well again...
But without anything here. It's all, every part fits the whole.
Yes, that's the thing. It's... Every line evokes an image to me. There's a picture there. It's a continuing picture that tells the story. And that's what great poetry does. It tells a story. It tells a truth.
And the story about what? Two people holding hands And in this day of nuclear proliferation, et cetera, that's a refreshing topic for me.
I think we'll go ahead and end it there. Once again, I encourage our listeners to check out Yeats and the old writers, what we would consider today to be the old writers, the old authors, the old poets, and enjoy the language, enjoy the words that they use, and revel in it, because we don't talk like this anymore. We don't talk and use language as effectively as they did back in the 19th century or in the 18th century. We've simplified language to the point that we lose a lot of meaning. That's my opinion, for what it's worth. But once again, thank you for joining us today. I apologize for the glitches. I don't know what's going on with our setup here, but hopefully it won't detract too much from the discussion. You all have a great day, and once again, thank you for joining us on One Poem, courtesy of Lee County, New Mexico Voices.